2018 was an interesting year for Vanguard, and we saw a lot of new things happening on the scene. We saw an immense power creep at the beginning of the year, also the reboot of the game, and for the very first time, they brought in YouTubers to help with the live streams for the World Championships. But with all the new things, a lot of bad things also happened, and that is where we're gonna focus on today, as I'm presenting to you the top 5 screw-ups or fuck-ups that Bushiroad did in 2018.
Stand up! Vanguard!
The rules for this list are quite simple. Whatever were the biggest fuck-ups that Bushiroad made this last year, be it a PR disaster, a bad card or a game design choice, or a stupid idea that the higher-ups at Bushiroad thought, hey, this is a good idea, sounds great. It has absolutely no negative consequences that we later have to deal with. Nope. Number 5. Announcing an empty ban list. Yep, they actually did this. For those who don't know and thinking, well, that isn't that bad, right? Well, let me paint a picture for you how this went down. It was August and the reboot just started, and with only 3 sets in for the OCG and 2 sets in for the TCG, we could see some issues for Premium. Of course, nobody was asking for a restriction for Standard. Premium, however, was a whole nother story. With only 3 sets in, we got some OP combos that people at the time asked and begged to be hit. You got stuff like the Royal Gift Marker spam with Alfred, the No Guard Ichikitan combo that started the whole No Fight No Guard series of W Slasher. OTT Giza became a thing, and with the extra booster we got the whole Ant Lion Phantom Black Zoa OTK. It looked like Premium would go out of control with these new cards, so people wanted a certain combo to be banned. The biggest ones were Giza and Ichikitan. So when Bushiroad announced in the beginning of August that the next livestream will contain a new ban list, everybody was hyped to see what's going to be hit. Will Premium become the ultimate format that everybody hoped it could be at the time? And then it turned out that the next livestream they announced that the new ban list update was that there was no ban list update. So let me clarify, they announced a week in advance, hey guys, a new ban list update is going to be revealed during next livestream, so be sure to tune in next week to see the new list. And then we wait till almost the end of the stream to tell us, yeah, there is no new update, it's still the same ban list we had since the beginning of this year. It was basically a stunt to get people watch that week's stream, as soon as there was no new reveals to do for the stream, so the only way to get people excited was to lie and say, hey, we're going to announce a new ban list. When people found out that they had just been had by Bushiroad, they basically went nuts all over social media. People complain about it, this stunt, and when all the memes are all directed at one source, you know that person or company just fucked up big time. And that's definitely the case with this stunt. They recently announced that next week after recording of this video, there's going to be a new update ban list. So let's hope that this time it's not the same move they pulled last year. Number 4. Turning top 8 into best out of 1. Alright, I don't know if this was the case for all the regions, but during Autumn Fest in Europe, they changed the top 8 matches from best out of 3 to best out of 1. This resulted in the fact that when you finally, after 6, 7 or 8 rounds of Swiss, made it to top 8, you could lose it all by opening one bad hand. This is personally even more frustrating, as seen as this year Autumn Fest I finally made it to the singles top 8, and then I bricked and needed the G assist against Tachikase, so you can tell what that spelled out for me. But it still came to a close match, so at least I didn't went down without a fight. But what made this even more annoying was the fact that they didn't told us this beforehand. We were in the middle of the fight when we got told,
guys, just to update to you, this is best out of 1.
And me and my opponent and even the players behind us looked at the judge with the expression, what? Are you kidding me? And this was apparently a call from the higher-ups at Bushiroad. It felt so stupid. The top 8 was called and not even an hour later, the winner of the event was announced. It felt so anticlimactic. How can you begin to promote a competitive tournament scene when your top cut matches are best out of 1? You can never decide a better player on one match. If one has just some dumb luck or the other player bricks and then it ends then and there for them. And this is even more apparent in a game of Vanguard and especially in Standard. And I want to clarify, I'm not salty against my opponent from top 8. It was a fun and great match. As I stated, it was a very close. We were at the point that either he kills me now or I will kill him next turn. What I'm salty about is that they robbed us, and in part also me, a real competitive setting. This was my and for some other players first singles top 8. Chris, which you might have seen in some of our match video, also got his first top card. He even made it to top 4. You can see in his match over at Different Fights channel if you're interested. I highly recommend you guys to check it out. It's an awesome fight. I hope to God that this year's Autumn Fest they changed it back, as best out of 1 top card has no place in the competitive scene whatsoever. But as stated before, I don't know if this was the case worldwide, so let me know if in your regional if they also changed it to best out of 1 top card. And to clarify, I'm talking about BCS that Bushiroad is hosting themselves. Number 3. Reboot PR disaster. Oh god, where to begin with this one? This has to be the biggest blunder that Bushiroad made this year concerning the international community. Everybody that follows my channel knows I'm a Reboot standard fan, but that isn't the same as saying that I'm happy with the way they went about it with it. First off, locals that needed to pre-order cases for the new support were given no information about the Reboot and split of formats beforehand. So they pre-ordered the Bermuda cases 2 months in advance with the idea that Vanguard would continue like normal. And then, Bushiroad out of nowhere announced the Reboot. Stores found out about this roughly about the same time as we did. So you can imagine what that can do with a store owner. You have no idea if the stuff you just bought is going to sell, cause mind you, the Bermuda set was still on its way. I believe even Divine Dragon's Apocrypha needed to come out, but I'm not sure on that one. So you now had store owners that were panicking because they didn't know if their sets were going to sell now that you couldn't play the new cards. But you freemium rights, you might think. Well, that was the biggest problem with the Reboot PR. We didn't know shit. The amount of information they first gave us when they announced it was very minimalistic. People weren't sure if the older cards meant anything anymore. Could we use them? Yes or no? What does this splitting of formats mean? How long is premium going to be supported? Are there still going to be G support card released to support that format? This and many more questions were asked in the international community, but we never got answers, and this uncertainty made us players and also shop owners question the future of Vanguard, and this was the primarily cause of the whole collapse of the secondary market. Until this day, it still is recovering. So they never released any more information about the Reboot after the first announcement? Oh no, well, wait till you hear this. They did in fact do that. In the Japanese newspapers, forums and interviews. They made sure that the Japanese side of Vanguard knew exactly what was going to happen with the Reboot, but let us international players in the dark. We needed to rely on fans' translation and whatever information we could scribble together. We finally got the official information from Bushiroad like 2 to 3 weeks in advance of when the first Reboot set, Unite Team Q4, was going to be released. Need I remind you, stores needed to pre-order cases of sets 2 to 3 months in advance to get them. This in turn meant that stores needed to make a gamble on the Reboot. Buy them blindly and hope for the best, or skip the first 2 to 3 sets and might lose on a lot of money or even lose your Vanguard player base completely. Luckily, things turned out to be fine. Reboot is great, Standard is awesome, and we got premium for the fans. But please, never do this again. The Reboot could have been so much better if they just communicated with the international community from the start. So here's a public service announcement for Bushiroad. There are people outside of Singapore and Japan. Yeah, I know, shocking. And what's even more shocking, some of them even play your game and spend money on it. So try to talk to us once in a while. But let's move on because they did some other stupid stuff this year. Number 2. The new once per turn ruling. I already made a video about this in the past where I go over all the different aspects of the once per turn ruling, but in this video I only have 2 things to say about it. I get that you needed to change something about this skill icon or skill mechanic, as seen as it didn't make any sense since the beginning it was created in the G era. Why call an icon once per turn skill, but then not use it as a once per turn activation, what any other card game does, but as a once per turn trigger mechanic? So many people got confused with this ruling. The act abilities were fine, they fall in the ballpark once per turn activations, but the problem arises with the auto abilities that have a trigger effect with an extra condition. The best known cards for this were the Ember clones. They got 2 conditions on their skill like the following. When it attacks the Vanguard, if this unit is boosted, then do something. When you look at this skill, you think, alright, when I attack the Vanguard, but I don't use the skill, I can still use the skill if I can restand that rearguard. Well, you're wrong, because you just fulfilled the first condition of the skill once, and because it's a once per turn auto skill, means it can only be activated on the first time it is triggered. If you don't resolve it that time, you can't for the rest of the turn. This even means if you attack the Vanguard not boosted, as seen as the auto skill trigger is attacking the Vanguard. The if boosted part is a secondary condition that doesn't have to do with the timing of triggering the skill. And this confused the hell out of people. So to combat this, they decided to change the once per turn ruling, and what's better timing to do this during the reboot, of course. So why in God's name did they decide to change the once per turn ruling? It is entirely and not errata older cards. They changed the ruling to what it should have been from the start. Once per turn means that you can activate the skill once per turn now, regardless of the scenario. But this meant that older cards with the once per turn clause got unnecessarily power crept out of nowhere. Clans like Nova Grappler, Great Nature and Aquaforce got 1 or 2 extra attacks out of nowhere because they can now use 1 more once per turn skill. This happened because of the past few years they developed the once per turn skills with the trigger restriction in mind, so they could make stronger effects that couldn't really chain that well. But now, because of the overhaul, this was no longer the case. The real impact wasn't that big, as seen as premium in the beginning wasn't that well defined, and the clans that could abuse this got outplayed by the new decks that came out with the standard support. But this once per turn ruling might come back if Aquaforce or Nova Grapplers get some good support. What I should have done is not change the old once per turn ruling, but make a second icon with a different color that represent once per turn activation. So you have the pink one that represent once per turn triggers, and a orange or a green one that represent once per turn activation. This way the older units keep their original power level and at the same time open up more game design options, as seen as in this scenario you have 2 different once per turn rulings you could build skills around. This also prevents the confusion that suddenly cards you played years and years with suddenly work differently. Before we go into our number 1 spot, I want to highlight some dishonorable mentions. Insane power creep towards the end of G. The speed that the power creep was introduced at the end of 2017 became worse and worse towards the end with Divine Dragons Apocrypha and Divas Vesta. Luckily, the reboot has been on much slower pace, and seeing the new support, power creep is going to be very mild. Release schedule gap. I never understood the gap between the OCG and the TCG, as seen as they don't change anything between the cards. And printing shouldn't be an issue because while they print our English cards, they also are printing the future Japanese set. So why did the gap become even bigger during the reboot? Why are we 2 months behind? And I know for a fact that this affects sales. We lose hype after a while. And also when we see that the next set of cards we wanted to get is going to be hard countered, well, why should we get the previous set now? I just don't get it. Bushiroad, please, close the gap. Misprinting of every goddamn card. I won't have to explain this to you. The images talks for themselves. And no, I didn't Photoshop them. Bushiroad made some stupid translation mistakes. But what really bothers me was the sheer amount and the fact that they delayed AL4 to improve product quality and then still have some of the retarded misprints they are. In some parts are game breaking, like retire a Vanguard. Really, I know people paid over $1,000 for these things, but it isn't a pay-to-win game. Luckily, it looks like they just fired a guy that keeps mistranslating these stuff, so I hope that in the future when they are hiring a better person, that this is going to be fixed. Speaking of pay-to-win, on to our number 1 fuck-up of 2018. Number 1. Giza. Alright, you might have seen this one coming, but yeah, Giza shouldn't have been made for the game, or at least not tournament legal, just like they did with the new Overlord to Victory. This card is so badly designed, it has almost 0 counterplay ability, it's almost completely reliant on luck, and it has 0 effort in playing the deck. It is boring to play and to play against. The mechanic that you can shoot 5 damage means that you can damage starve your opponent without any kind of backlash. You disable their heal triggers, so 4 to 16 of their opponent's triggers lost some of its power. Because you either give them 0 or 1 damage, means that most decks can do 0 plays, means it just becomes a vanilla fight. But granted, there are some decks in the current format that still can work without 0 counterplays, but that isn't a lot. And all of these things make the card terrible for the game and even for the meta. Giza is seen as the gatekeeper for premium. Either your deck can beat it and you have a somewhat viable deck, or it loses to it and you won't stand a chance in the big tournaments. There's a reason why so many people scream for its ban, but as soon as they are putting out promotional work with Giza on it, indicates that it probably won't be the case anytime soon. All this makes Giza the biggest fuck up of 2018 in my opinion. Giza could have been a great non-tournament legal fun card that people could experiment with at their locals and at home, but now it's an annoying deck that still is roaming all the different tournaments and probably won't go away anytime soon. And there you have it, the biggest fuck ups or mistakes Bushiroad made in 2018. And although they made some mistakes, there were plenty of good and great things that came from Bushiroad for Vanguard in 2018. And that's why next week we're going to look at the top 5 greatest things to happen in Vanguard. It took me more effort to come up with this list than next week's list, so that can tell you that Vanguard is doing great for itself. But let me know what you guys thought of the topics that I highlighted in this video, and did I miss any major things? Of course, keep it positive, let's not make it all negative. We're still playing this game and having a lot of fun with it. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.